Welcome into the Sunday Smash. Been a while since I got to partner up with my old school buddy, but we're the old dogs of the bunch, so it's only fitting that I'm paired tonight with my man Ira. I'm Jeff. You guys know that. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Hope you're well, and don't forget, like, subscribe, share, and participate. Have some fun. It's July after all, so we probably can get to a lot of questions tonight in the chat. If you have them, I wouldn't mind. I don't know. It's up to you. Sure. Ira, your mind wrapped around the trek to Charlotte?
Yeah, man. I'm just a little disappointed you're not going to make it after all. You're going to stay and man the fort, keep doing the wildly popular Jeff Cameron show every day this week.
Well, it made more sense the more we realized that we had three guys already going up there, and then Gene saying, look, man, I'm going to need that radio show to be on. And the problem is when you get up there, scheduling-wise, there were no guarantees we were going to be able to do the show. So I volunteered to stay back. I said, I'll hold down the fort, guys. You hop in the vehicle and drive up to Charlotte. I'll do all that I can. So
it'll be me, Tom, and Aslan doing it old school. We're going to be making the trip to Charlotte. It's going to be a good time. Well, I think we're leaving Tuesday morning. We get up there that evening, and then the festivities will start Wednesday morning. We'll have ACC Kickoff, the Atlantic Division, that first day, and should be a lot of fun.
Well, and I think too, in all logistically, in all seriousness, it does make more sense because I know you guys are going to pipe in while I'm on the air on Wednesday and be able to talk to you guys live from Charlotte, so we can start getting some stuff going. Right there at the bottom, Till Dog is asking us if it's the last trip to Charlotte. I don't know, man. I don't think anybody knows anything when it comes to the landscape of college football and what's definitely going to happen or not. I saw your piece on warchant.com today and read what you had to say. I'm not a big Pat 40 guy.
Neither am I. But I thought that was a pretty decent way to just kind of evaluate the state of college athletics, I thought.
Oh, right. No, I think what you did was smart. It's just that initially when I started to read it and saw that you referenced 40, I went, I don't know, Ira. We're off to a shaky start. Here we go. But then the more I read it, I'm like, okay, I see what he's doing here. So that's fine. Yeah, listen, I think that what you wrote is interesting and it's insightful. I also think it's accurate to say that people, of course, the hand wringing and the nerves about Florida State's future is understandable, but I also think people really do underestimate just how powerful Florida State is in the world of college football. These last 5 years have taken a toll on all of our psyches. And you know how it is, man, when you're going through a rough stretch in life, I don't know, it could be financially, it could be physically, it could be emotionally, whatever it might be. When you're not at your peak performance, or as I like to say, operating at peak efficiency, then it's really easy to doubt what you ever were or what you ever did or accomplished or thought of yourself, and you can lose confidence, not unlike an individual. I think that's what's happened with Florida State fans collectively. I think that listen, there's for every reason they're upset, frustrated. I'm amongst them. But at the same time, it does not in any way discount nor remove the amounts of, I think, real cachet. I use that word a lot because it's applicable in football, college football in particular. It doesn't remove the 40-plus years of that and being such a major component of big-time college football. And I think your piece and 40 and all that other stuff points that out.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I saw, he basically what he did for people that haven't read it yet is he went through the entire Power Five. He came up with 5 criteria to evaluate college athletic programs, college football programs, everything from performance on the field, academics, attendance, TV viewership, and how your school does across all the sports, not just football, and then kind of came up with a metric for that. And he didn't just evaluate the schools that could perceive to be on the market, like the non-SEC, non-Big Ten schools. He did it for everybody. And when you do that, he's got Florida State in the top 20. And at first I was like, yeah, Florida State's in the top 20. They should be. And then I was kind of like, you know what? Florida State's much higher than 19. If they're doing well, if Florida State is performing, as you said, at peak efficiency, or even just better than what they've been doing the last 4 or 5 years,
right,
Florida State would be in that top 10 probably. And so, and again, I think we lose sight of that a little bit. It's funny, just relating it to personal things. I'm sure when you were talking about finances or physical health or different things, the worst job interview I ever had was I had been working for somebody who didn't like me and I didn't like them for about 2 years. And it affected my job performance. Like because I didn't like them. This was early in my career. Because I didn't like them and I didn't respect them, they didn't like me. I did a bad job. Like it affected my work. So
Right.
that when I started applying for jobs, I went on a job interview. I was probably like Eeyore, like in there, because I just complained about that boss, and I complained. It was just like, well, who wants to hire that person? And
Right.
so I know exactly what you're saying. It does affect things, and I think it's the same thing for a fan base. And it's everybody kind of feeds off of it, and it just kind of spirals. But yeah, man, Florida State, especially if they get back to winning 8, 9 games, something in that, just in that ballpark, I think puts Florida State up there in the top 10 or 12 probably.
I think when you travel, you find that out too. I think
Right.
that's the other thing is that when you travel and you go to away venues and you run into opposing fans, and it doesn't even have to be, like a rivalry game or anything like that. You just go somewhere else outside of Tallahassee, somewhere outside the state of Florida, and you go up to a Syracuse game, up to a Virginia game, over to whatever it might be, and you sit down and talk. Let's say you have the good fortune of encountering a reasonable fan, and you guys are sharing a cold one together, and you're just talking about your two programs, right? Almost always I have people say to me, well, this has been a tough stretch, but my goodness gracious, you're at Florida State. You'll be fine. It's like they recognize a lot of times what maybe we need to recognize. Now, listen, in the day-to-day operation of being bad, it's difficult to stomach, wrap your mind around, and be patient with. And I'm not saying that. You should demand always for your teams to perform at their very best and certainly perform to what they're capable of at the very least. But I am saying that you can't lose sight of the bigger picture. And somebody on here, I think it was Gator Kirk, noted that it's not about a power or wins. It's about money. Yeah, it's about this is where we've learned now that this has shifted from the last realignment to much more of a big picture sort of outlook, which is to say, which collection of teams creates the most amount of eyeballs on sets or not sets anymore, if you want some streaming service, whatever it might be. Collectively, who's watching more of what? And whether that is, again, through a cable service or an app, it doesn't really matter. The point would be who's drawing the greatest ratings for that. And, well, any conference that is going to add, let's say, a Florida State and a Clemson next would be adding to eyeballs on sets for sure.
Yeah, and, I go back to in 2012, 2013, during that realignment shuffling, and I was talking to Eric Barron, FSU's former president, and we were talking about the options, just kind of, is the Big 12 on the table? Is anything else? If the SEC is not interested, which he believed they were not interested at the time, then what other options are there? And, there was some talk about, could you get in the Big 10? Could you? And he said at the time, no, like the Big 10 is only interested really in flagship schools and AAU schools. And we've always talked about that academic part and how big of a deal is that AAU part. Well, I really think, and somebody tweeted this at me the other day, might have been at both of us, and I noticed it the other day, and I think it's a very good point, that when the Big Ten talks about AAU schools, really what they're talking about is big, strong, powerful, financially secure, well-heeled schools with well-heeled fan bases, because that's what comes along with it. You're getting these flagship schools that have gotten all the research money, that have gotten all of the funding, and they have the huge alumni bases. So the academic part of it's, nice, and it's probably a factor to some degree, but it's also kind of a way to make sure you get the biggest schools and the most powerful and richest schools and alumni bases. And I think that's what everybody's kind of going for now. It's not about, again, geography or even alignment or teams that are having success. It really is about getting the most I really think the alumni is a huge part of it. How big is your alumni base? How many people are going to watch these games? And where is your campus located?
So what I think is fascinating then is that's where Florida State fans rightfully get nervous all the time, because it's not a big alumni base by way of comparison to some of the other schools, but it's growing.
Bigger. It's bigger than every other one in the ACC. So you got that going for you.
You do have that. I think too, again, if you go back and think about where this is headed, you brought it up, I think it was a couple weeks ago, either on Headlines or on my show when we were just talking. One of the things Florida State's endeavoring to do is to continue to show not just with on-the-field success, which is something they have to have, and we've talked about how vitally important this season is, but they're showing any potential buyer, if you will, hey, we're keeping stuff up here. We're doing what we need to do. We're investing. We're expanding. We're growing. We get it. We know what you want from us.
Right.
So they're efforting to do that around every turn right now.
Yeah, and this season we talked about so many reasons this season is big. I mean, it's obviously big for Mike Norvell. It's big for that whole staff. They have to produce this year. We can all talk about what went wrong in 2020 and how unfair it was to judge them on that. And 2021 was, the second 8 games was a step in the right direction. The first 4 were a disaster. This year is it's another kind of opportunity for that staff and Mike Norvell to prove what they are. And that's going to be big to recruits. It's going to be big to the current players. And then it's also going to be big to, college athletics and mass, that these other schools and these other conferences realize, okay, Florida State's got its act back together. Because I don't know if people know that. Like we're confident. I mean, I think we're pretty confident in this team for going into this season that it's going to be an improved team. And it's got a chance to be a pretty good team. I based on what we saw the last half of last season, I think they should be a pretty good team, maybe even a close to good team. But I don't know if the people out in the world know that. They may have stopped watching when Florida State was 0-4. So this is I think a litmus test for this program, what they do on the field.
It's interesting to think about it from that vantage point, because if, in fact, the vast majority of college football fans went, looks like Florida State still hasn't righted the ship, and understandably, watching an 0-4 team with one of the most embarrassing losses, no, not one of the most embarrassing losses in school history, if you at that moment went, still no signs of life down there in Tallahassee, then you really aren't prepared to see them have any success this year. You might. Florida State might actually surprise quite a few people this year. In order to do so, though, and we will hyper-focus on this for 2 reasons, I think really maybe even 3. First of all, confidence levels cannot be high until you start winning games. So you've got to get off to a good start. Secondly, the way recruiting works now, how well you play in the first half of the season is of vital importance. When you're making impressions on, again, the recruiting timeline has shifted. So these first 4 games are really big. First 4 or 5 games, really big in terms of the impact you could have on which recruits start to pay attention, how many more of them start to pay attention. And then, of course, obviously, if you're going to have the kind of season that you're hoping for, you can't start 1-2 or 2-3 or something like that. You're going to have to start hot. I mean, I think you got to win either, if not both, ideally, the LSU or Louisville games. You got to at least win one of those. You're going to start 1-0 against Duquesne, so you got to be at least 2-1 and give yourself a fighting chance to get off to maybe a 4-1, 5-1 type start, and then you can kind of dare to dream. We can't get there soon enough. I know once the season starts for you and me and all of us who work in this game, it becomes a madhouse because you're just working. And I don't mean this to complain at all. It's an awesome job. But you're basically working 7 days a week once football starts, and your head's spinning because for example, Ira, you've got stories every week to write. You've got to do game stories. You got to do post, all that whole thing. And obviously, I'm prepping every day for the show and doing whatever videos we're doing and all that. Next thing you know, we're at the end of the season and we're trying to calculate what just happened. And so I hesitate to say, can't wait for the season to start, because once it does, it's just mind spinning. But I really am more excited about this year because of all that's at stake and the potential you talk about. I'm probably more excited about this season than I have been in some time.
If you're Mike Norvell, what do you think? How do you think Mike Norvell is going to be that week leading up to the LSU game? Because, he's coached in big games. To some degree. But I don't know that he's coached in a game against an LSU in a venue like that with this much on the line as a head coach. And I'm not saying he's going to be nervous, but that is a new experience for him, right? Like Brian Kelly, that's just another game. Yeah. But for Mike Norvell, that's a big moment, and he knows what's all on the line. Yeah, if they lose that game but then beat Louisville, things are kind of still okay, and you're kind of you've got a chance to still do a lot of things you want to do. But that game is, I wonder how that affects him, and if he lets that affect him, or do you think he's at the point of his career where that wouldn't affect him?
Oh, I think it would have to affect him to some degree. I think, listen, I don't know that he'll be overwhelmed by the venue and the magnitude, but I think you already saw signs in spring that he has a very firm grasp on the importance of the upcoming season. I don't think he knows that he doesn't have in perpetuity. Time to get this thing moving. It's got to happen now. It's got to happen now. He's laid the groundwork. He's very pleased. He talks a lot about how much they've done things the right way, that they've been patient, that they've stuck to the plan in the face of some pretty severe adversity. They've stuck to the plan, and I do commend them for that, by the way. They could have really panicked at 0-4. I mean, I don't know how you couldn't have panicked, but he really didn't. He didn't seem to waver too much or deviate too much from the plan. But I think that he knows you're kind of out of give me a little bit more time type rhetoric. Like, he hasn't said that, but you know what I know. Like, this, you gotta win.
But it's a weird thing, though, because it is, the COVID year was ridiculous. So this is really like his second full real season, but he's been here 3 years. So that clock's been ticking. So yeah, I mean, nobody's expecting him to win a title, but there has to be a major improvement. I wanted to mention Gator Kirk asked when preseason camp starts. We haven't gotten the official date, but I think it's going to be the start of next week, early next week, which would be like the 27th, maybe somewhere in that ballpark. We don't know the exact date yet. FSU probably will announce it this week, but we have ACC Kickoff the middle of this week. Then they'll come back. Their players will probably report for camp. They don't report for camp anymore. They're already here all year, but that over the weekend, and then practice will start that following week.
Well, and also we do know some things about, at least, I mean, I don't think this is airing. The coaches have to be there on Friday. So my point would be that the bottom line is, if you got your coaches checking in with your head coach and everybody doing, getting set, you're not going to wait from Friday to Wednesday, Thursday the next week.
It's going to be the start of that next week.
It's going to be the start of that next week. So basically what we're telling you is like a week from tomorrow, guys, we're pretty sure camp gets underway. Could be Tuesday, but like a week from tomorrow feels like a pretty good bet. Do want to thank, am I reading that right?
Slias
Carpenter. Thank you so much, man. Thanks. That's appreciate that. And also Kyle. Kyle asked a question in addition to the contribution. I feel like we start 4-1 with losses to either LSU or Wake Forest. Tough stretch down the road after that, but it would be a great start. Well, if you can start 4-1, you do yourself a hell of a lot of favors, because it means you have a good win somewhere in there. That would be very important.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm bullish on their chances against Wake Forest. I really think that at home, I think they gave Wake Forest that game last year with 6 turnovers. I think they were still in that muck of not knowing who the quarterback was. And I think, just the team was not playing smart, wasn't playing clean, and Wake was a good team at home. I think that game here, I think Florida State's going to play much better. So I think I like them winning that game. And I think they're going to win one of the Louisville or LSU games. They could win both of them. They could lose both of them.
And that would be that.
Well, that would be a kick in the pants, huh? If they were both great games, because Louisville, they're not going to be favored at Louisville. Do you think?
No, Louisville will be favored that game, right?
Yeah, so they're probably not going to be favored in either of those games, but
no, they won't be.
And I think they're going to be good games. They might win one or both. They really need to win the one, though, right? I mean,
you got to win one. You got to win one. I don't think you can go 0-2 in those games. At some point in a one-score spread, 2 points, 3 points. That's what we're talking about here with LSU and Louisville. Yeah, man, those are kind of 50-50 games. You got to win one of them. At some point, you got to win. Florida State has an inordinate number of single-digit spreads. You could project this out. Now, again, things change as the weeks go by. Quarterbacks, knock on wood, whatever, they miss a game, or an opposing player who happens to be the best player on an opposing team gets hurt. You don't root for anybody to get hurt, but the point would be, things happen in football all the time that radically alter the way you perceive a contest in week 4 or 5 from where we sit right now, right? It does change things. But just on the surface looking here, as a guy who has to always look ahead for some of the other stuff I do with college sportsbook and all that, I'm always looking at numbers to try to find some values to jump on. And when I was looking at Florida State, and I just was so intrigued, I just continued to look at Florida State time and again. I'm like, that will be a 3-point spread. That will be a 4-point spread. That will be a 2-point spread. Florida State will be favored by 1 or 2 here. There'll be an underdog by 1 or 2 there. That might be worst case scenario 6 points, which is still, less than a touchdown, an extra point. There's like 9 games like that, Ira. I mean, just there's a lot of stress in that, but there are a lot of opportunities in that. And if you're well coached and you, knock on wood, stay healthy, you should win more of those 50-50 games than you lose, because we know what we say about coaching staffs who lose every 50-50 game. I mean, so, at some point you got to win those games.
They're former coaching staffs.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that on the positive side of that, though, you're not going to have many of these games, which we've seen the last 3 or 4 years, where you're a double-digit underdog and you don't
Right.
have a prayer of winning it.
Right.
Like I think Clemson at home, I think they've got a puncher's chance in that game, especially if their quarterback isn't much improved from what it was last year. They've got to get much better quarterback play. They'll still have a lot of other advantages, but if your quarterback's not good, you can get got, and Florida State will be at home. But to your point, I think they're going to beat Boston College at home, but that's not a game that's going to be a cakewalk. And it's
Right. They should win that game, though. You better not lose that game. I'm putting that in the win
100%.
column,
I'm with you, but it's not going to be. They're not going to be favored by 14.
No, probably not. Yeah.
It's going to be a somewhat competitive game. So, yeah, it's just this is like a transition year. I mean, I really think this is that transition to getting back closer to where you need to be, but you got to take care of business. Like you can't let those opportunities slip away. And the one thing you talked about close games, one of the things we never really talked about how they got better in the last half of the season compared to the first half and why they won games. A big part of it was how much cleaner they played. They eliminated so many penalties, the turnovers, the dumb decisions on special teams until the Florida game. But I mean, they had really kind of cleaned, and just doing that gets you to where you have a chance to win a lot of these games, where in the first month of last season, they killed themselves.
Yeah, really frustrating. And they were very confused early in the season, and they were not confused at the end of the season. I did find it disappointing that after all of that hard work to get back and salvage something of a good season, they lost their cool in the Florida game, and they fell victim to shenanigans before the game even started.
That's exactly what happened.
And they never looked like they got it together. Now, I think Florida, period, was a better football team than Florida State. And I don't think it's a good Florida team, but that wasn't a great Florida State team. But the point is, they gave themselves no chance with the nonsense and losing their cool like that. You can't have it. And I think Norvell was bitterly disappointed by that. Like, I think he realizes that it's perfectly acceptable, you're not happy about it, to go on the road and lose to a Florida team that, frankly, has just an edge in terms of player talent. You can lose that game. You can't lose it like that. You can't have that kind of nonsense. That really had to have probably been one of the more upsetting losses. Like the early stuff you can kind of look back on and realize, oh man, we really made some mistakes in camp. We misjudged what we had. We also had some confusion on the back end. But we rectified that by the halfway point. We got things going in the right direction. And then, damn it, man, we had that thing at the end of the year. So I don't think they'll have problems like that this year, Ira. I think there's enough veteran leadership on this team. I think there's enough in the way of talent. And I think that the consistency of messaging from this coaching staff and the way they've gone about implementing on a daily basis kind of what the core values, if you will, are of this program should be and what they expect of players from work ethic and discipline and focus and time management. I think that's all in place, entrenched. I don't think you're going to see it. If they get beat, they'll get beat by some teams on this schedule who have a little bit better talent. There are a lot of veteran quarterbacks that they face this year. For example, NC State's got more talent than Florida State and, frankly, a better quarterback. So I think that's a problem game. Could they win it? They could. But you wouldn't be surprised if they lost that game. But those are the kinds of games where you say, all right, I'll live with that. I'll live that we lose to a team that has veteran players and we're on the road and they've got a guy that started a ton of games at quarterback. I'll live with losing to Clemson, who's better on the defensive line and has more talent from a skill position standpoint. You just can't be losing to teams that you have better talent than or that you're at home in a 50-50 game. You got to win those games.
Right. And then, the other thing about that Florida game is I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it was the shenanigans before the game. I thought that got Florida State's guys out of their minds a little bit. The other thing was that was the first game, I think, where a Florida State football team went into it with real pressure. In probably, man, I don't know, 4 years.
Yeah, that's fair.
Where maybe the Virginia Tech game, Willie's first game, where there was actual real expectations. Because going into that Florida game, all of a sudden, man, they had won, 5 of the last 7. And now it's, man, you can get bowl eligible. This is for getting back to a bowl game. And Florida's down and their coaching staff's out. And that team had real pressure on it. And the only reason I bring that, kind of focus on that is that's probably going to happen again in that LSU game. Because I talked about the pressure on Mike Norvell. These players also, this will be the first time for a lot of these guys where they go into a big game against a big name opponent. And we could talk about all the problems with LSU and the turnover and the players they lost and the new systems and the new coaching staff, all that stuff is true. And it makes LSU probably more vulnerable, which is why we think FSU's got a great chance, even though LSU probably has a better roster by far.
You do.
What gives you the other part of it, though, is everybody knows they've got a chance in this game. Like, so they're not going into – it ain't like the North Carolina game 2 years ago where they just went and let it go. Man, nobody expects anything from us, or Clemson last year. This LSU game is going to be a little different. To me, it's almost like that Oklahoma game for Jimbo where there's actually like a feeling like, okay, there's something on the line here. That's a mentality these guys haven't trained for, really, I think.
But you can't. You really can't train for it. You can only experience it, survive it. If you win the game and you learn from it, if you lose the game, you learn from that too. But you have to go through it, right? And so there's no way to replicate that. You can't make the practice fields feel like the game in New Orleans. You can pipe in all the noise you want. It's not the same as looking across from the line of scrimmage and seeing an LSU player who is big, strong, can run, all that stuff. So it's – yeah, and listen, I think LSU will be well coached. Typically Kelly does a good job, so I think they will be. I don't like him, but regardless, he's done a good job. So we'll see. He's in year one. I hope they're a confused mess. I hope that's the game that exposes what kind of disarray that program's really in, Ira. We would love all that, but I don't know. You can't prepare yourself for it other than to know what you know and play to what your strengths are and hope that's good enough. I do know this because somebody mentioned it in the chat. They might accidentally win 7 or 8 games if they're not the worst special teams unit in college football. We keep glossing over that just because we keep thinking about the sexier things, which are offense, defense, all that stuff. They cost themselves so much in the way of yardage, field position, time of possession. I mean, the things they did in special teams, it's hard to even draw it. Like if you were thinking of a calamity of errors and how you would inflict that upon a team, you would do what Florida State did on special teams. You'd be like, well, this is how you can ensure you're going to give yourself no chance to win some of these games that should have been close in the fourth quarter, is do this nonsense that we've saw in weeks 1 through 5, really the whole year. They never really got much better on special teams.
And especially no matter who they put back there as a return man. But, and I will say this, I'm going to apologize again to Micah Pittman because I should have had him higher just for the ability to return punts. I think I had him 12, and a lot of you guys had him higher in the top 10. Yeah. That factor, I should have had him higher just because I think he changes the complexion of games. I mean, if there are 7 punts, 6 or 7 punts by the other team, yeah, he might save them. Oh. I mean, just by catching the ball, let alone maybe returning
100 yards, Ira, 100 yards. I mean, how many times we kept watching? I mean, the joke amongst Florida State fans and media is we would yell at the commentators, stop saying hidden yards. They're not hidden. I'm watching the ball bounce 20, 30, 40 yards down the field. That could have been they're not hidden at all. They're obvious, and they're smacking us across the face every Saturday. It was so brutal.
And some muffed punts and just one thing after another. So he actually might be a weapon. And then, that was another reason, we really want to see Winston Wright get back as early as possible because he's returned kicks. I mean, he's had 100-yard kick returns. I mean, he's a legitimate kick returner. So those two guys, not only did you get 2 receivers who might be your 2 best wide receivers when Winston Wright gets back and healthy, if he gets back to what he was before, they also could take care of your punt returns and your kickoff returns. And Florida State's just been bad. I mean, it's really been, and I like John Papuchis. You like him. We've talked to him. I think he coaches well. I mean, I've watched him in practice.
Defense fans are great.
And Mike Norvell is like, he talked about special teams from day one. So he cares about it, and he takes an active role in it. He's in all their special teams meetings. So he decided to stand pat, and I'm fine with that. But if the special teams aren't good again, man, there is going to be a ton of heat on John Papuchis and then on Mike Norvell for not doing anything about it. It has to be better. It has to be a lot better.
Yeah, I said at the end of last year when we were kind of taking inventory, And I talked about some things that I really liked throughout the course of the year, some things that improved over the course of the year, some things that never got better, special teams being the most obvious amongst them. I talked about some things that I'd like to see from a personnel standpoint on the coaching staff. You know, you and I might disagree a little bit on that, but there's some guys that I wouldn't have here that they have here. But the point is, the biggest one was special teams for the reason that you just mentioned. The head coach at his opening press conference put an emphasis on special teams as he addressed the assembled media and mega boosters at said press conference. We were both there. He made it a point. You can't lose the opening press conference, right? And he didn't. Yeah. But you can't lose the opening press conference. Pretty much everything you say, people are going to buy into, but you have to be careful what you say. And so to me, when he said that you're going to recognize what kind of football this team is through special teams, well, hell, man, that's a hell of a thing given what we –
That's not what you want to say about last year's team, yeah.
No, I mean, think about that. I mean, he had to have been mortified to the point you're making. He had to – I'm sure some chairs were thrown, and that's not the kind of guy he is. But if I sat up there at my opening press conference and told everybody that would listen, I guarantee you we're going to be good on special teams, and then that happened, I'd be pissed if we were mediocre on special teams after I had mentioned it, let alone a travesty.
Yeah, and again, what's weird about it, I do think it became a self-fulfilling prophecy for those players. You could tell it, and I think John Papuchas had admitted it. When they put different people back there, you could see the weight of the world on there. And we joked about it in the Florida game where, Pokey's like fighting the ball like it's a, it's a missile. The
Florida guy just catching it over the
just without a care in the world. Well, that's how it should be. But like Florida State's guys got so domed up because of everything that had happened throughout the year. And so, and it didn't matter who they put back there. Anybody they put back there, it was the same story. Either they let him bounce and roll 30 yards, or it was a disaster. So, look, that's that. And the other thing about that is it's the easiest things for fans and media to latch onto because it's out there in the open. If a right guard's getting beat all day, that might be a little tougher to know. Or if a safety and corner aren't communicating, whatever, those things might get lost. But when that one dude's back there and can't catch the football, your coaching staff looks silly.
Remember, so it was the Syracuse game, right, where they fumbled the punt, and it totally allowed Syracuse to get back in the game. And basically, if it's not for some Jordan Travis heroics, they lose the game. And what was so weird about that was at home. And secondly, when he fumbled that punt, the whole stadium knew that this was going to turn into a nightmare of an ending. Now, it worked out, but it did turn into a nightmare, and we knew it. We knew it as soon as it happened. And I went, man, and I think that's why nobody wanted to catch a punt again, because I have a feeling they were told, look, man, if we have the lead and they're kicking the ball to us and there's 5 minutes to go in the game, if you're not sure that you can catch it, just get the hell out of the way. We'll win the game as long as you don't turn it over. But that creates a mindset, Ira. That creates a scared, tentative, pensive mindset as opposed to attacking. I'm here to make plays. This is what – I'm just catching a football. Yeah. These guys are so good. They're such great athletes. That Florida kid, I hate to keep giving him praise. He's catching the ball like this, like talking to the ref as he catches it and throws it over. It was like, ball's coming down. He's like, right here. Okay, here you go. There. It was ridiculous.
Well, and that goes back, and again, I have given them a pass to some degree on the return game because, you don't have good returners. You don't have good returners. But I do think it's a coaching staff's job to make sure the players don't get in that state of mind where they're afraid to go out and do anything, because now you're killing yourself by letting the ball bounce and roll 20 yards. So, yeah,
Pittman's not scared. Somebody, Spartan Knoll pointed that out. Yeah. And, yes, I agree with you. He's not. They've got guys that can catch the ball now, in particular Micah Pittman. Micah Pittman wowed me. Just wowed me in spring. We say it all the time, but I'll say it again here since it's applicable, since we're talking about special teams. You're right. He may end up being a star for this team because he also did things I didn't think he could do, which is compete for jump balls and win a lot of those battles, in traffic. And he's tough too. He's physically tough. So who knows? He might. Golly, can you imagine? In addition to catching the ball, they actually flip some field position, like not just catch it, but do something with it.
And we hyper focus on that. Kick returns weren't as bad, but
they weren't good.
But But it's been a minute. I mean, it's been a long. I mean, think about even like in the end when Willie was here, they kept trying to return him, even though you could fair catch him inside the
They do it
25.
here too, Ira. They do it here too.
Well,
I mean,
but it
now.
was worse with Willie. I mean, like with
Yeah.
Willie, it was like they didn't realize that was a rule.
Well, remember the answer that he gave, and I understood what he was trying to instill in fairness to him, although at some point you have to pull the plug on the experiment. They wanted to create a mindset of aggressiveness, of playmaking. And he thought, well, we got athletes. You ought to be able to make a play.
But you really don't. You really didn't, Willie. That's really the part. That's really the heart of the whole problem is Willie thought he had 90 Florida State, and he did not.
No, and I thought last year there were times where I wanted to yell at Papuchas. I wanted to like post game say, "What, my man? They're giving you the ball at the 25. We're good. We're good. Stop doing this. Stop." Listen. We've probably stressed too much of it on this tonight, but I do. Really, it started out us bringing that up. We looked at it as a positive, and what I mean is, we know it can't get worse, and we actually think they're equipped to make it better, like legitimately better.
It has to. I mean, it just has to. And again, like we go back to, things fans can accept. I think the things that are going to come back to haunt Mike Norvell if the season doesn't go well are if special teams doesn't get a lot better because you stood pat there, if the receiver play doesn't get a lot better because you end up bringing back Coach Dugans when a lot of people wanted to see a change there, and then also, fair or not, if Jordan Travis gets hurt, that's going to be something that comes back. And if the backups don't perform at all, I understand how this all happened. I understand why they didn't go out and get a big-time transfer or they couldn't go out. There's a lot of factors there. We've written about it. We've talked about it. But at the end of the day, if something happens to Jordan where he misses serious time and you don't have a quality backup, that is going to be an avalanche on Mike Norvell because that's all the people who don't know why it happened the way it happened are just going to know, how did you not see this coming?
Well, it's interesting, Ira, and it's fun. This is the only time that it's fun to get old because you can gain real perspective on various scenarios and situations that you see play out on teams that you cover, right? Good and bad. Things that you learn from that one time that they did this at practice and they never should have done it, and it directly affected them in the game. And then the next thing you knew, it became an avalanche. And all. So there is that situation where you talk about, okay, I know why he made the decision that he made about quarterback position. And you and I, based on the fact that there really weren't many options, kind of agreed with it. Like, what are you going to do? You can't go out and get somebody that is perhaps going to win that job unless you can get a superstar, and they couldn't get a superstar, right? That we would have agreed if you could have gone out and got one of the two, then should have. But if you can't, then you go get a guy that is maybe the equivalent and say he wins that job, you've lost Jordan. He's gone. That's the end of that, right?
And how many of those guys want to go to a school that's got a Jordan Travis?
Right. So that you couldn't get those guys either. Really, the options were very minimal. But I've also learned over the years that the reasons could be logical. They, that they're not excuses, they're reasons. Doesn't really matter. At some point, either you are or you are not winning football games. And if there are things that people can point to overwhelmingly so as to the reasons you're not, it doesn't matter if you sensibly take the person step for step through it, you've lost them. They're not coming back. They're done. And frankly, if you lose a bunch of games, then at some point, look, that is on you. That's it.
Yeah, and I think, but that part of it, I think, especially as a coach in year 3 or year 4, once they've been there for a while, is, fans and media start kind of getting a book on you, the way like teams get a book on a pitcher. And so they figure out, okay, well, this, like you just said, this is something that's been a problem. Let's see if they fix it. And they maybe could tolerate something else going wrong, but you can't have the same problem multiple years. You can't have the same thing. Man, how long is it going to be before we fix that? Why can't you fix that? That ratchets up the frustration to a different level. And again, we talk about Jimbo, and in 2012, 2011, there was a lot of frustration with things that happened that season. 2012, there was less frustration, but a couple things happened again, and you lose NC State, you lose the Florida games. If those had continued into 13, if like you lost the game in 13 for that same reason, man, people would have lost their minds. But he didn't. He got better. They got Jameis. They win the national title. So this is, again, we're at a point now where people aren't going to be as forgiving if it's something they've seen be a problem in the past.
Yeah, and the circumstances are so different. That's what's frustrating too, because Jimbo didn't come in and take over a situation and then immediately have a COVID year where he couldn't for 18 months visit recruits or their coaches. He couldn't form relationships. That's what happened, obviously, in this situation to Norvell, right? He basically went 18 months without being able to form bonds, relationships with coaches. You got screwed out of your new car smell, which is what's going on right now with Miami. They are benefiting, obviously, because they bring in a coach. He's one of their own. There's momentum that happens typically with that hire. Now, you got to win. We'll see. If they don't, then obviously that's a real problem for them, and they'll quickly go back to being mediocre on the recruiting trail.
Do you think Kirby – somebody brought up Kirby in the chat. Do you think Kirby got better as a coach last year, or do you think they just were so overwhelming it didn't matter? Like, do you think he learned from some of the problem? Because he lost some games his first few years that, not a lot, but he definitely lost a game here or there that they probably could have won. Do you think?
No, I don't think he got any smarter as a coach. I think that their talent is overwhelming. If you ever look at the draft, I mean, that was insane.
So you just got to not screw it up at that point.
Yeah, no, he's done a good job. I mean, you get credit for recruiting to that level. You do. I mean, that's part of the job description if you can make it happen. Walked into a really good situation and made the most of it because he learned a lot from Nick Saban and in his coaching career. He learned how to set up a system by which to bring in the best recruits in the country, and they have succeeded on that front. At some point, with a defense that's that good, you just have to just be nominally decent on offense, and they were physical enough.
And then I saw another question earlier. I don't know, Matthew might not be able to find it, put on the screen, but somebody asked about how concerned are you or we about what Miami's doing in recruiting. And I want to say one thing real quick. It's not just the NIL situation. Obviously, John Ruiz, their big benefactor down there, and there are others. They have got a lot of big money people who are supporting Mario Cristobal in a way that they did not support previous coaches, certainly not Manny Diaz. And then the NIL makes opportunities for do it on a bigger stage. But Mario is also a great recruiter. I mean, he was a great recruiter when he was at Miami as an assistant coach. He's a great recruiter at Oregon. He's a great recruiter there. How of Florida and Miami right now, where's your concern about? I know Florida State's got to focus on Florida State, but where are you looking at those other two?
Long term, I would be really nervous about Florida always because they're in the SEC and the money gap is going to continue to grow. But short term, sure, Miami has received that bump from bringing in a new coach who's wildly popular. And like you said, he is a skilled recruiter. Let's hope they suck because that all goes away quickly, guys. It does. Time and again. How many times have we heard it? How many times have we heard it with Miami? We're still waiting, everybody. We're still waiting. They still haven't won an ACC championship. The only time they played for one, they got their doors blown off. They have been irrelevant forever. Does it feel like that's changing? Does it feel like the emphasis is being put back on football? Looks like it. Looks like it is from the outside looking in. It certainly does. And that's never good. That doesn't make me happy because I hate Miami, and I'd like to see them lose every game they play. But clearly, they're serious about trying to get better. We'll see how the season plays out. They've got, I think, a very good quarterback. I said that last year. I think they're going to win a lot of games. I think they're a better team than Florida State. I think they'll beat Florida State this year. But I think that I'm not really concerned about whatever Miami is right now because Florida State has to get to a point where they're not under 500. Then you can start worrying about the recruiting wars and have a chance to even some of that out. I also think Florida State finally got their NIL organization in line. I do think that they are now competitive for guys. I think they have opportunities. We saw that. It was a great week, last 10 days or whatever it was, where they were able to bring in a couple four-star guys, including a defensive end that everybody wanted, including Miami, including Florida, including Alabama and Ohio State and USC and a lot of others. So they've shown that maybe they've got their house in order on that front. Until you win games, you're not going to cash in big time. Now, again, different set of circumstances. If you fire a coach, bring in a new coach, you typically get a bump if it's not a COVID year. but so the point would be I'm expecting Miami and to some extent Napier at Florida to do okay initially. For us, I think the key is right now to get to 8 wins, get to where you are on stable ground, where now all of a sudden recruits who wouldn't otherwise consider you do bother to take a look and listen to that pitch, because I think they do a good job of connecting with kids. We know Alex Atkins is a stud. Alex Atkins is the weapon you need if you can win some damn games to win over these 50-50 guys. So, and I think Mike's a good recruiter in the sense of connecting with kids, but unless you win games as a head coach, you're going to get dismissed summarily. And I understand that. If I'm an elite player, if I'm an elite wide receiver, well, Florida State hasn't had one of those in a while, and I don't know that Ron's doing a great job of recruiting. And secondly, I would point out they're not winning games. So if they win games, now all of a sudden maybe I consider big picture stuff from Florida State.
Yeah, the other thing Cristobal has going for him is that, the new car smell. He hasn't lost a game yet in Miami. So they can talk a big game, and then if they go out and don't play well, now it's a little bit harder. And that's where Mike Norvell really got hurt in that first year, having the COVID year, because they couldn't even get kids on campus. I think that first they got here in December, January. Mm-hmm. Then recruiting, February was completely shut down. Beginning of March, they were finally able to get kids on campus. They got a lot of kids on campus. And then by like March 12th or 13th or whatever, everything was shut down by the pandemic. And they couldn't get kids on campus for almost 2 years after.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so it's impressive, I think, what they've been able to do, especially you look at the way they closed the last class, getting Azaria Thomas and Sam McCall and Julian Armella and some of those guys. So, but the challenge, again, is the same thing where he's lost games and they've lost games. So they don't have that new car smell at all. And so now you have to have success. You can't just promise hope. I remember, again, going back to Jimbo, just because he's the last, coach who was here for a long time, when his first recruiting class or two, those kids that would come in, they thought he was going to win a national title like overnight. Like that's how it is when a new coach comes in. They just assume it's just going to be great right from the start. And that's your best chance to have those great recruiting classes. Mike Norvell didn't get that. And so this year he's got to produce for that reason, because to get some excitement from, they've won over some recruits here or there, but to get like the bigger, like in bigger numbers, they have to have success on the field.
Well, and just to answer a couple people here, continue to remind yourself, guys, that it wasn't solely the COVID situation. It's that he was the third coach in 4 years.
Right.
So you're starting over for a third time, not a first time, the way that the other coaches you're mentioning now about the COVID years were. People just want to bury their head in the sand and pretend like those things aren't reasons. They want to always point to those things and call them excuses. Again, competing things can be true at the same time. If Mike Norvell goes 5-7 this year, I think they should fire him. Mike Norvell, I believe, is a good coach who inherited a nightmare situation and has struggled with it. That can both be true. I think that's where we're at. We'll see if Mike Norvell does enough to stick around. I would tell you that no matter how you feel about Mike Norvell, you should root for him. Not just because you're loyal to Florida State and you love Florida State. If Florida State has to start over again, you start the clock at zero again. You lose out anything you have going for you in terms of relationships built, recruiting areas that have increased and improved. If you're going to start over, well, by the way, if you're going to start over, you're going to start over without Atkins. You're going to start because he's going to be gone if you fire Norvell. That's where you're at. So you don't want to have to start from scratch again. And after they did what they did last with Willie, and I understood it, but now all of a sudden you're paying off Willie. You're hampered financially. They ended up bringing in basically a bean counter as AD so they could get the money situation right. But you were screwed. And so you brought Mike Norvell in, and I think Mike's a good coach. We'll see if he gets the job done. If he doesn't, they'll have to let him go. But if you start over again, man, again, financially you take a step backwards. Recruiting, you take a step backwards. You start from scratch again, and that's another, 3 years? So now how long will it have been since you were a meaningful program? 10 years, 9 years before you start to sniff having a successful season again? No, man, you don't want to do that.
No, it's funny you said this. I had this conversation at lunch the other day with a friend who I was saying that even if you're not sure that you believe Mike Norvell is a long-term answer, I don't know how you could say that based on what we've seen so far, but if that's what you believe, you still need to hope that he has success, because stopping now and changing course, I think, would be disastrous. Now, they're in a better position now. I do think Florida State's in a better position now in terms of culture and all those things, work ethic, behind the scenes structure, organization, their expectations, to where somebody coming in wouldn't have quite as much heavy lifting to do as Mike Norvell did after the way things ended with Jimbo and then the 2 years of Willie. But again, to your point, you don't know, especially with the transfer portal, how many of those kids are going to stay, how many of those kids are going to go. You can only bring in 25 players a year, but there's no limit on how many can leave. And so there are so many things that could go backwards if you had to make a change. So Florida State needs to have success. Mike Norvell needs to have success. But I really think the people that support this program really need to hope that this is a good year, because you just can't have it. I don't know what you would do, even if they go 6-6 or 7-5, and there's just no energy. They'd probably have to stick with him, but it would feel like, okay, well, in a year he's probably in trouble, and then now you're starting over again. So this is where they need to break through. They have to.
Yeah, I think, I've been on record as saying, and it's okay. Some people disagree with me. That's fine. If they don't have a 7-win season bare minimum, he's a dead man walking. He may not get fired, but he's not going to have success here. It's my opinion, if he doesn't have the kind of season that we're talking about, and again, wins and losses happen for a reason. You have to see how they play out. If you're injury riddled, it changes the way you have the discussion. But presuming they don't have a disastrous campaign with all kinds wrought with injury, and they're just average again, and they don't take another step forward at all. If they were to go 6-6 or something like that, Ira, I just don't think you can at that point do enough in recruiting to get this turned around. So you're just kind of doomed to have some more middling seasons before you play out the string and fire them.
Well, because how do you get that energy again?
You can't.
Yeah, a new coach gets it just inherently, unless it's just a disaster from day one. But more often than not, the coach that first year, even into the second year, sometimes you have that energy of the hope of what's to come. But if you've gone through 3 years and you're not making progress, then that would be concerning. But I think, man, again, this is all like we're talking worst case scenarios. I think they're going to play well. I think they're going to pick up pretty much where they left off last season. I think they're going to be a team that wins. Again, you think they're losing at Miami. You think they're probably going to lose at NC State. What other games do you think right now you would say straight up you would pick the other team? Clemson. Is there anything else that just straight up you think that Florida State's a good chance they're going to lose that game?
Yeah, well, NC State, I don't like them to win. Clemson, I think you said that. NC State, yeah. Clemson, and I don't.
At Miami.
I think they'll lose at Miami. So those
what about LSU? What about LSU?
I am so stuck on the LSU game. This sounds like waffling, but I'm even looking at it. If I remove my garnet and gold colored glasses and just tell you that even from a gambling standpoint, I'm struggling with that game, because how do we know what LSU is going to be in year one under Kelly with the new system, new coaches, and all that they just went through? I don't know. I know they got some good players. I went through the roster and from a depth standpoint to try to get a sense of what Florida State's going to be facing. And I also looked at the transfer portal and saw what they brought in, and they have a good roster. It's a better roster than Florida State's roster, but it's not appreciably better. It's not overwhelmingly better, and it's their first game, right? So when you think Florida State has the tune-up, can you get out to a lead? Can you hang on for dear life? I mean, it will be fascinating. I do think that's kind of a pick'em game. I get why LSU's favored, especially with it being in New Orleans. But I feel like that's kind of a pick'em game. So I wouldn't just say I'm automatically picking LSU.
And even the Miami game, I mean, you're giving them the edge because they've got the better quarterback and they're at home. But it's not like that's a game where you say Florida State can't go win that game.
Correct.
If they play well, and if Miami doesn't play,
but Miami will be favored, and Van Dyke is a good player who I think takes another step forward. But that's what you listen. This is why we get. This is the exciting part of it. Again, I think Florida State has 8 to 9 games this year in which they're going to either be underdog by 2 to 3 points, something like that, or a favorite by 2 to 3 points. That we're looking at the bulk of their schedule, in essence, on a neutral site, if you would, being 50-50 contests. And so often, Ira, and this is where we hold our breath, because let's admit it, we've pointed out the missteps. We've pointed out the mistakes made by this coaching staff. They've also been really unlucky. They have been really unlucky. And the latest example was Winston Wright. You go out and you get a guy right off the bat that has proven himself in Power 5 games, contests, Power 5 league as a reliable, dependable, go-to wide receiver. That's something you have to have because your receiving core has been terrible. And that's the guy that gets dinged up. You never want to see anybody get hurt. But, man, if we're picking and choosing, I mean, can we pick a different position group? Can we find another guy at that receiving core to get dinged up? And, again, I wish everybody well. I'm just saying, like, that's another case of really bad luck. And I just hope that changes. I don't think anybody's doomed. I don't believe in curses. I don't think that the football gods are out to get him or anything dumb like that. It's just he's been a little unlucky. It's about time for that to turn, right? I mean, come on. He's got to have some breaks here and there.
The one thing I do think, the one big thing, and because I've gone through this a few times, there are a few things that have hurt Mike Norvell between COVID and just some different situations. But I do think, when I say COVID, everybody had to deal with COVID, but it was his first. He just got here as the third coach in 4 years. But the other thing, the one thing that's really worked in his favor that was available to him, and he has done, I think, a very good job of seizing it, is he did get the advantage of the transfer portal and the one-time exception where kids can be eligible right away. And I think last year they did a good job with it. And I think this year they've done a good job with it again. Winston Wright got hurt, but they've done a good job of assessing their needs and going out. They went out and got 4 wide receivers. They went out and got 4 offensive linemen. They got a linebacker who will probably be a stud in the middle of the defense. Yeah. They went out and got another cornerback for depth. They got some nice pieces. They got a running back who may end up being the starting running back, and Trey Benson. So you got to give them credit for that. And that is one thing that, if Mike Norvell had gotten the job 3 or 4 years ago, that door wasn't open. So he did get – that's the one thing I think that's worked out at Mike Norvell's. But it's not only specific to him. Obviously, everybody can do it.
But Florida State has proven their prowess in assessing those kids, convincing them to come here, and then doing something with them. The draft has proven that these guys, this is a place you can come and elevate your stock, and that's why they continue to get more guys in the portal, or at least Florida State is considered heavily by talented players. If you think about Keir Thomas and you think about, obviously, Jermaine Johnson, and we can go on down the list, they've had a lot of kids come in here and really make an impact. So that is an area of expertise for them right now that they have largely been a major success in that arena, the transfer portal arena. Well, it's 8 o'clock. I'm going to call it a night.
I'm with you, buddy.
We're buttoned up here on the Smash when I'm around. That's it. We're done at 8.
We're not dilly-dallying.
No, you got traveling to get prepared for. I got a show tomorrow. Looking forward to it. What do we got on the site? We got a lot this week, obviously. Warchant.com. Corey, we wish you well from a distance. He's got surgery tomorrow, so I don't know if they're recording a wake up tonight or not. I didn't know whether or not I should promote that because I'll allow for some allowances when a guy's going in for surgery, right? So we wish him well. And, it's been great talking to all you guys. Thanks for joining us and having the discussion. We'll do it again. Smash will be here every week. And it's almost go time, guys. Almost go time. Basically, 1 week from tomorrow, they're going to be starting practice, and we can all celebrate the return of football, which is something no matter where you stand in this debate, we all love. So that's good. And Ira, thank you, brother.
And we'll have coverage of ACC Kickoff starting, Tuesday night, but through the middle of the week. So stay tuned throughout the week for lots of videos, stories, and other content on the radio shows, et cetera, from ACC Kickoff up in Charlotte. Yeah, and you'll join me on the Jeff Cameron Show tomorrow. I look forward to that as always. And then, of course, I got these guys coming on the show all week long from Charlotte. And, of course, Corey will recover and wake up watching, all that good stuff. So we'll talk to you soon. Our thanks to Matthew, who did a great job. He always does in producing. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Be good, everybody.